Good morning, friends. Today is Tuesday, June 8, 2021. I'm Karen Bodenschatz, and I serve First Lutheran Church in Onalaska, Wisconsin, and this is my morning musing. So on Sunday, as part of our practice to pray through the nations of the world, I shared some information about Liberia, who is the country that we're praying for this week. And during the early service, I mentioned that Liberia was established in part by freed slaves sent there by the American Colonization Society. And so today I thought I would use my musing to talk about what that society was. So the American Colonization Society was formed in 1816 by Presbyterian minister Robert Finley and some of the country's most influential men. Its original purpose was to transport freeborn blacks and emancipated slaves to Africa. You see, the prevailing view in 1816 was that free black people could not be integrated, in fact, were seen as a threat to the mainstream white American society. And tensions were growing between races. And so Reverend Finley also believed that African Americans would only fulfill their full potential if they were living in Africa. He hoped that slave owners would then free their slaves and send them to Africa, thus ending the threat of black people in this country and ending slavery. Once formed, this society focused on purchasing and freeing slaves, and then paying for their passage to West Africa, where they had procured some land. And then they helped them settle in there. And between 1821 and 1867, over 10,000 Black Americans, along with some other Africans, were resettled by this society. Arguments against the society was that it was draining off the most educated free black people and therefore preserving the institution of slavery, not ending it, because it was the educated free black people that were often challenging the institution of slavery. So you get rid of them and the threat of slavery ending was also gone. The society's influence and work would stop after the Civil War, when the lives of Black Americans changed, in theory, and they saw no need to immigrate to Africa. The land that they settled would, in 1847, become the country of Liberia. And in a surprising turn of events, the society would be revived in the 1870s by Black leaders, when the hopes of African Americans were dashed after the Reconstruction. So about 2,000 African Americans would be sent to Liberia, the last being in 1904. And despite conditions in the United States for African Americans as they deteriorated at the turn of the century, a vast majority of them decided to stay here, decided not to emigrate, which makes complete sense to me. They weren't Africans, they were Americans, even if their citizenship was in question until the late 1800s and even into the 1900s. And it had been well over 3 centuries since they had come to this country. So the ACS thought they were doing a really good thing. And while there were those who disagreed, it wasn't enough to stop the practice of shipping Americans to Africa. The problem comes from when the thinking that this practice was grounded in, that is, that Black Americans could not be a functioning part of a free society. In other words, that their place was as slaves or in Africa. And that's the key, isn't it? That African Americans had for centuries been considered property, and then as second-class citizens. And that kind of thinking becomes part of the psyche of a people, of a nation. And it takes a long time to change that thinking. And progress has been made in this country in the effort to see African Americans as the beautiful people that contribute to our society that they are. But we only have to pay attention to what is happening in our world to know that we still have a lot of work to do. And part of that work is understanding our history and coming to terms with it. Not that we as 21st century white people are at fault for what happened several centuries ago. We're not. But to know that history that has shaped us in ways that we may not even be aware of. And now that we're aware of it, every time we learn something new, we get to choose how we allow it to shape us, if in any way. So friends, be well, be kind, with Jesus as your guide.